if it weren't for a friend of mine, I would have completely missed out on this wonderful show. It's called The Marvelous Miss Maisel, and it's about a Jewish woman, housewife in the 1950s New York, who discovers her talent in stand-up comedy after her husband leaves her. It is very, very funny. It is extremely well written. The characters are fun. You see where they're coming from. It's a very well told story. And when it's supposed to be funny, it delivers. The stand-up is very good. It's very funny. And when jokes are supposed to bomb, they do. And it's appropriately awkward. They do a very good job with it. And it's a very interesting insight into history, into comedic history, especially with the time period, the 1950s, she was not taken seriously because she was a woman. This is dealt with very honestly, but it doesn't feel like it's an after-school special. It doesn't feel preachy. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel unnatural. It feels very organic and very honest and very sincere in that this was the reality for a lot of women, for a lot of people. If you weren't, and that we talk about this a lot, but seeing it and feeling it is another thing, especially when you're looking back at this point in time. I do find it interesting. It doesn't, the husband who leaves her, Miriam or Midge Maisel, who's a very fun character, really talented actress who plays her, but the husband as well, it's so clear from the get-go that she's too good for him. But he's not portrayed as a monster. He is portrayed as someone who is definitely not appreciating what he has. He's a lost guy. He has a cushy job. He has a beautiful wife. He has kids, a very fancy apartment. His family's got money, but he doesn't want it. He leaves her for his secretary, which, cliche. Oh, it's actually incorporated into her first routine, which is very funny. And I like seeing that it feels that even though he's not a bad person, he still did something that hurt her. He still hurt and affected the people around him. And he is rightfully called out on it, although their relationship ending is surprisingly more civil than I've seen other breakups and experienced other breakups. But heartbreak is good for comedy. It's interesting because she's completely original, whereas he steals Bob Newhart's routine and says, oh, everyone does it. He doesn't even tell it that well. Every schmuck performing at this coffee house steals Bob Newhart's routine. And it's really cool to see that real figures are referenced. Like, you have Lenny Bruce, who's a character in there, and they reference Don Rickles. All these famous comedians of the time. I'm really impressed with the storytelling as well. I feel like I'm in this environment. I feel very much like I'm part of this harsh world. It's very pretty and idyllic on the surface, and the aesthetic is beautiful, but you see how rigid things were, and you really see this disconnect, and you see that there was a very strict hierarchy that was very tough to break into. And the thing is, it deals with issues that we're dealing with now in comedy. It's a very relevant show. It's a show I feel like both men and women can really enjoy. And it's on Amazon Prime. It's getting a ton of attention for the Emmys. It's got 14 nominations. Rightfully so. It is very well done. And it's what can I say? It's great. One thing I think is, a lot of things I think are great, but one thing I've noticed especially, the main character is somebody who is beautiful and competent and smart, and you usually don't see that kind of person in the comic role. Usually someone like that would be the dramatic leading lady. Usually someone like that is the love interest. And especially with a lot of comedians were not beautiful as kids, or they were really the awkward, ugly ducklings who found their voice through comedy. And I do like that she is a beautiful, smart, competent person, and has this very heartfelt routine the heart of her first routine that gets everyone's attention is, why wasn't I good enough? And that's a very strong emotional truth. I do like to see that, breaking the stereotype that beautiful, competent people can't be funny, because that's bullshit. You can. And she does it very well. She's very beautiful and very funny. So that was really cool to see, because usually, especially now, you're seeing people like, you see a lot of Liz Lemons, you see a lot of Garfield types. Oh, I like food, I'm lazy, I'm slovenly. And she's not. She is well put together, but she still has difficulties with these relationships, and her husband still leaves her for a secretary. And she still taps into that feeling, why wasn't I good enough? Even though the reality is, anyone can see from the episode, just by watching, she is too good for him. And it's honestly, you feel invested in these characters, and you think, no, you are better off alone, and you are good at what you do, and I want to watch you succeed. You really want to watch her succeed. And you see how they do interact a couple times, and you do see the difficulties she has. I'm only 3 episodes in. She gets arrested for indecent exposure and profanity, which seems like a violation of the First Amendment, but I would not be surprised if that was real. Apparently many comedians were arrested for challenging the status quo. Struggle of artists. Highly recommend it. Great show. I hope it wins a ton of Emmys.